Hello everybody and welcome back to the Mr. Matthew Does Coding YouTube channel. Today, we are going to be talking about everything that you need to know about how to make GUIs and how to utilize GUIs. So, let's get started. First of all, what is a GUI? Well, if you've ever played a Roblox game before, usually you'll see buttons on the screen. And those buttons are essentially GUIs. It stands for Graphical User Interface. So it could be a menu that pops up in your game, or a button to open a shop, or some dialogue that a character has. All that is GUI. So, how do you make a GUI first of all? Well, everything with a GUI happens in the Starter GUI part of the Explorer. So, click on the plus, and then hit Screen GUI, and that'll then give you the ability to create GUIs. Now, you don't see anything on your screen because this is just the foundation for a GUI. We put all our elements inside of it. So if you click on this, it'll show you a ton of different options, or it might even have this pop up here. Because when you hit Starter GUI, then this UI menu pops up. It's gone, now it's here. Now it's gone, now it's here. So, we have our screen GUI. Let's click plus, and I'll start with a frame. So, a frame is just what it says. It's a frame. And you can move it around on your screen, and you can resize it. And essentially, it's just a shape. It's just a rectangle that you can put stuff in. Usually frames are used as like background images for certain things. Like you could have a menu where this is your frame, and then you put all your little buttons inside of it. So let me actually get that frame back. I didn't want to delete it. Okay, so with a frame, let's look at its properties. So its properties, let's go over a couple of them. Background color, it just allows you to change its color. We'll give it a cool little red right now. And then its position as well. Positions are different than how they are normally with vector 3s and all that kind of stuff. So it's in 0, comma, a number, and 0, comma, a number. So if I increase this number to 2, it moves it up. If I bring it down, then let's just put like a 1.8 or a 0.8. Or it just doesn't work sometimes. Screen GUIs are difficult. But its size over here works usually in decimals. So 1 is really, really big, like this. So I'm going to bring it back down. So we have our frame, right? And that's basically just its position and its size and its color. It has a transparency. If we look it up, background transparency, so you can change its transparency there. It has some similar properties to parts, where you can change its color and its transparency and its name and stuff like that. Like this frame, we can just name it testing frame. And boom, it's now named testing frame. Simple as that. So that's pretty much the basics of how a frame works. Let's move on to a text label. So text label, it's like a frame, but it has text on it. So, just like the frame, we can change its color. Let's give it a blue. And then we have text on it. With the text, you can change its color to be something like red. So we have this, and then we could even change its size to be different. But that doesn't work unless this text scaled thing is false. Which is another thing. If text scaled is on, then it'll always scale the text to be as big as it possibly can be based on the size of the text label. So you can see its size is dynamically changing based on its shape. But if I turn that off, then it stays consistently the same size and does not change. Let me turn it back on. So then that's where you can change its size with this little bar here. But I like to keep text scaled on. You can change a text font. You can change it to be bold or italicized, and then you can look in here, and it gives you a ton of options for different fonts. I'll just leave it with this one right now. And then as well, it has the same, it functions the same with positions and sizes as well. They have a rotation as well. That's something I forgot to mention with the frames, but they do have a rotation. And it's not like, I mean, I guess it's like in degrees. So 180 degrees, boom, 270 degrees, 360 degrees, 90 degrees, negative 90 degrees. Basically like what you learned in geometry class. So, yeah, there's that. It also has a little property called Clips Descendants. That isn't really something that you need to worry about. We can even change this name to testing text as well. That's text labels, and then there's a more advanced version of a text label called a text button. And essentially what this is it functions the same as a text label, except you can click on it. So if I hit play, then on my screen, I'll have that button, and I can click on it, and it does things. But if I try and click on this, it doesn't do anything. But you can see it kind of darkens when my mouse hovers over it. So yeah. In a little bit, I'll get into how you can script things with this. But for now, I'm just going over all the different elements. We also have a text box. A text box it's like a text label, but the player can interact with it. So, if I click play, then I can click on this, and I can actually add things into this. So, yeah, that's pretty nifty if you want to have your players type things in to like a box so that they can search things up and stuff like that. There's image labels. So it's like a text label where it can't be interacted with the player, but instead of text, it uses an image. So I could go down here to the image, property, and I could click on Add Image. This is like some textures that I've used for a game that I'm working on. Let me know if you want to see some devlogs of that, because I'd be happy to make those. And you do that, and boom. And you'll notice, even though that texture there was transparent in my files, it was, it's not transparent in game. So you can just do background transparency and crank it up to 1, and now it's completely transparent. And then if you want your image to fit a certain way, there's different properties for that as well. So if we go down to image, that's not the right part. Let me scroll down real quick and find it. Scale type. This is what it is. There's fit, so that it fits within the confines. It's kind of like text scaled. Then there's crop. So it'll crop the image depending on the size. So the image is a square, but if you have a rectangle, it's just gonna crop it. There's also slice, which does this funny looking thing. Never really used that one. Stretch, so it'll just stretch it to fit the size of your image. I think this one is the default for Roblox Studio. Tile. Tile kind of feels like stretch, but I don't really see much of a difference with how the two work. So I usually keep mine on fit because that works the best for me. Image button, I don't really gotta go over that. It's just like how a text button works, but with the image properties. And then there's also scrolling frames. Scrolling frames are a bit complex in that they allow you to, scroll through different parts. So it's kind of like a frame, just you can scroll up and down. So if I wanted to add something to the scrolling frame, I could click the plus here, and then I could put a text label in here, and I could make it, I don't know, let's just make it red so that we can tell it's there, and then we'll put another one. And stretching gets really, really weird with these if you try and duplicate things inside of it, so be careful with that. I've never had the best experience with these, but now I can scroll, and you can see that they scroll with the little sidebar here, and you can also click on the sidebar, and that'll do stuff with it too. And now I think that we've got all those established. Let's talk about some UI elements. This is where things get fun. So we have a frame, right? And it's just a basic box. Well, we can actually do more with just this basic box. Let's click on the plus and search UI, and we see all this fancy stuff here. Let me explain what UI corner is first. It does what it says. It adds corners to your element. So you can put the corner radius to be different sizes. It's like if I keep increasing this, then it keeps getting rounder and rounder. I don't know exactly how big the limit is on these, but it can get pretty large. I think it's about 1,000 or 10,000. It's 1,000, yeah. And if you set it to 0, it's just a square. So 50 is pretty nice. Another UI element is UI stroke. That'll add a border to your UI element, and we can also change its thickness, so you can make it like that thick. And then there's also a line joint mode, and that'll tell the game how to round out or go around your element. Usually round is the one I stick to. I've never really used bevel or miter. Just round. And then you can change its color. So let's change it to this. Another really cool one is the UI gradient. So let's search that up. UI gradient. So this one allows you to essentially travel back to the 2000s, 2010s era of the internet where everything had a gradient on it. So if you click on the little 3 dots here in the corner, not this, because if you just click this, it'll just change it to a solid color. But if you click on the 3 dots, it'll prompt you with this screen right here. And then that gives you the option to change the change the color. So we can go to the very end here, and we can change this to be a red. And we can go all the way over here. We can change it to blue or something, right? So I have this, and the red actually didn't register. I think it just goes from its base color to whatever color you set it to, and then we can rotate it like 90 degrees or something. And see how that would look. 270. This one looks about right. And then now we have a gradient from blue to white going from top to bottom. And then if we can change this to red, and then if I go to the color sequence, I change this to be a blue, then it has a red to blue gradient. A couple of these other UI elements are a bit technical, to say the least, but they still have their good uses. Like, I'll get into a UI list layout. A UI list layout, usually that would be something that would be done for scrolling frames. Let's open a scrolling frame real quick. And we'll do this. So now we can scroll through it. Let's add a couple of text labels into here. Move them around. Give them all different little colors. Like that. And then what we can do is if we insert a UI list layout, then it'll format everything into a list. If I delete this and I take these all and I move them all weirdly, and then I re-add that UI list layout back in, then it'll format everything. And in its properties, its padding, the padding is the space between the different elements. So 100, then it'll give it 100 units of space between it. If we do 10, then it'll give it a little bit, and it gives you a fill direction. So what you want it to fill in what direction. So now it's horizontal. We can't actually see the rest of that because it goes off screen. So Clip's Descendants, that's another thing that I said it wasn't important, but it is a thing that does come into play here, where if you turn that off, then that blue square will actually stick out. But let me change it back to the vertical. It's vertical alignment. It can do it from bottom to top. It can do it from the center, or it can do it from the top. It's horizontal alignment. It can do it from the left, the center, or the right, which is pretty cool. So yeah, that's essentially a list layout, and if I get rid of it, then it all goes back to how it was normally. Another interesting UI element is the UI grid layout. So that'll format everything into, well, a grid format. And what you can do with this is you can add padding into the different elements, and it would just be done in two directions, not just one like the list. It would be done this way, and it'd be done this way as well. But the cell size, that's another thing. We can change the size of the different elements in the list. They cannot be dynamic, where some are different sizes. They're all formatted, well, in a grid-like fashion, so they end up getting all formatted to the same size. The fill direction max cells, that tells the game how many cells, which is the game refers to these squares as can go in one direction. So if we set this to 5, and then we started duplicating 4, 5, and then it would start on another line. And every 5, it would start a new line, and it would keep doing it like that. So let's reset that real quick and continue looking at the properties. The fill direction, there's the horizontal and then there's the vertical. So if we do the same duplicating thing, it'll instead start filling it vertically, and it will then only go 5 downwards, and then it'll keep going horizontally. And there's no horizontal limit, so it just keeps going off screen. So let me reset that again. And I'll change this back to horizontal. There's the horizontal alignment. There's center, there's right, and then there's left. I'll keep it on the left. There's the start corner. So we can start in the bottom left corner, or we can start in the bottom right corner, the top left, the top right. It kind of just changes the order that these go in. So, let's see, what else is there to talk about? There's the vertical alignment. So if you have things set to be vertically done, then it'll start from the bottom and go up, or it'll start from the center and it'll go down, or you can start from the top, not the center. Oops. You can start from the top and then have it go down. So that's essentially all you need to know about the UI grid layout. So I'm going to now explain what a ton of these UI constraint properties, or these different elements, are. They add constraints to the sizes of different UI elements that you tell it to. Now, why would you want that? Well, let me explain. So let's say I have a text label, and it looks like this on your screen. But if I go to view and then test, and I go to device, then it can show me what it looks like on different devices. Now, you can see that it completely broke when I went to a smaller screen. And you can see it's not in the same place every single time. It's kind of poorly done. So, what can we do to combat this is we can use a plugin, and it's called Autoscale. Autoscale is really useful. There's a free version. I have the premium version, but there's a free version that allows you to get any text label or image label or anything that you have UI related, and you click Smart Scale, and then it'll scale everything to be how it should. So then if I go back to the device testing and I go to the other devices, it scales it appropriately depending on what device it's being done from. So I can go to all these different devices and just click them at random, and they all format to the exact same way. Now let's see what it did. What it ended up doing was it put an aspect ratio constraint, and then it put a text size constraint. So what a UI aspect ratio constraint does, it constrains its aspect ratio. So if we set its aspect ratio to be bigger, then it would look slightly different. But the reason why it has that constraint is so that it constrains its ratio of length to width for different devices. Since by default, Roblox doesn't actually scale GUI elements to fit with other devices, which I think kind of stinks, but it's what we have to live with until they eventually end up adding some kind of system to help us out. But for now, we use stuff like plugins, or you can do it the manual way by adding these things in. So if we keep increasing its aspect ratio, then it ends up getting kind of funky. But if you just kind of get it to what you want, like this, then everything will work. And you'll see also, if you try modifying the size of these certain things, now they have this little red caution sign because you have this. And it'll tell you text label size is influenced by UI aspect ratio constraint. So with the UI text size constraint, that only really applies when you don't have text scaled on, because when I have that off, then it will screw it up like that. But if I turn text scaled on, then everything works fine. If I get rid of this and turn text scaled off, then everything screws itself over. So there's, I guess, two different methods. There's adding the text constraint and then putting text scaled on, or just not having the text ratio constraint, which is pretty simple. So essentially, that's everything you need to know about how to navigate GUIs, create them, move them around, spicing them up with UI elements, and coloring them, making things all fancy for your game. Now, if you wanted to code things, like with the image buttons and the text buttons that I mentioned earlier, then that gets into a whole other realm of coding that I'll talk about in a part 2. Yeah, I'm sorry that it has to be 2 parts, but it's just so much to talk about that it needs 2 parts to get all the information out that is necessary. And also, if you want to see that devlog series that I mentioned earlier, leave a like on this video, and if it gets enough likes, I'll do it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Peace.